Thoughts. I'm your host, Shone with a W. I hope that you are all enjoying this amazing, immaculate day we have. One extra, you could kind of say. Today we're looking at the sky again in another beautifully captured web of essentially connections. And I think I've sat down and looked at this before, looking up at all these small interwoven connections between the branches in the tree. And in this type of perspective, perhaps it's a little more challenging to see the true 3D dimensionalness of this blessed tree that I live, or am blessed to live by so much for so long. Anyways, thank you so much for sharing your attention with me. I truly do appreciate any and all comments, thoughts, conversations, and even when you leave a message, for instance, in the chat right now during these live performances, I truly appreciate that, even if they do mostly go unanswered, simply because, well, when I talk, I don't necessarily look down at the screen as I'm talking. I'm in my flow of thought on the topics and the word choices, and essentially looking over what I say while I say it. So sometimes when I look down at the comments, often I'll lose my train of thought. Or like yesterday when I was doing the video, I found that I would lose my train of thought simply by having a bylaw officer giving a ticket to a vehicle that I don't know why they got a ticket. It didn't really matter to me anyways, yet the occurrence was somewhat distracting. And well, when I do look down at the comments, often they can distract perhaps from the flow. And yet, I definitely would love to take more time and slow things down, and perhaps a future space where the video is different, more of a group Zoom-like chat type of experience, perhaps. But that's perhaps for the future. Me thinking of it now, simply perhaps, as I've mentioned before, remembering a future moment when I take on that experience. Actually, there's so many different experiences I would love to have. Often I talk about what New Earth is perhaps for everyone else, but for me, it's simply experiencing the freedom of living and being and doing, moving forward. I often relate to the idea that the series called Pokémon, which is a show about a young boy named Ash, and he essentially travels around different regions of areas that have these beautiful beings called Pokemon, and they're different so-called pocket monsters from all walks of reality, from essentially animals or even like propaganda tools such as coughing and wheezing and other different beings, some from the future, some from the ancient past, some metallic, some organic life, and yet they all have one thing in common. They hold and maintain consciousness, are able to communicate with each other and with some selected Homo sapiens in the show, such as Ash and others. And they're able to have these outrageously, magnificently spectacular battles. And once the battle's over, they go to a nurse and they're perfectly better, ready to go out and do it again. And they're constantly working to be better in the way they battle, better in the way they connect. And essentially there's a whole universe of adventure. And in this TV show, as I'd mentioned, called Pokemon, these characters are going throughout that, like Ash and his friends, and they change from season to season. They're essentially experiencing everything their world has to offer. There is a very decreased amount of talk when it comes to currency or to buying and selling things. Recently, they interjected it into their nearest series, Horizon, yet in most of the other episodes that I've watched, the idea is that in this world, everyone's doing what they love, like bakers doing things because they love baking, and nurses being nurses because they love being a nurse, and professors, you get the kind of the idea. Even the trainers themselves, or the bus drivers, doing things because they love doing that, or caretakers or gym leaders, and there's or even scientists. There's one character named Clem, and he's always making things blow up, but yet he's always pushing his craft of invention forward. And so there are so many awesome morals and great ideas essentially infused into the show, into the way that the character's life unfolds. And yet, the experience on the other side of the Pokemon, which is the card game, well, that's a whole entire different experience. See, because I recognize that there are different marketing tools used, for example, and they would have, and I've experienced this twice, releasing specific cards that are essentially OP'd, and that means overpowered. Cards that, therefore, because they're overpowered, everyone's going to want. And because everyone's going to want them, of course, it'll promote buying more cards, yes. But then they take those cards that are rare to begin with, and then they package them in with the sales of more of their packages of cards at full price, essentially, plus a premium, just because now you don't need to hopefully get the card. You get the card because that's the whole reason why you're spending that extra money. So I've experienced both sides of Pokemon. Now, to explain what the card game's all about, it's about collecting cards, collecting cards from essentially packages that are very challenging to get the card that you would choose to prefer to have, in some cases, the ones that they are so-called rare. And yet it's funny how often these rare cards, they came up so many times. Like, you would buy a 10 pack of those cards, and yet you might not get any of the cards that you wanted, the special ones, calling them rare or ultra rare or super duper rare, whatever it is. You would have it unable to get a lot of those cards, creating a lot of people, therefore, to buy a lot of packs at one point in time, making money hand over fist by convincing people to buy cards. And so, therefore, I totally love the idea of Pokemon, and yet there are many different things in our world where there are two sides to everything. So there's the side of blessing the world with the creation of something, and then there's the side of monetization. And I had a great opportunity to look into the world of monetization when it comes to, well, for instance, video games. There was this show on TV, Apple TV, and I forgot what the title of it was, but it had something to do with gaming, and these two creators, two genius of their times when it comes to game creation and game theory and all that lovely stuff. They had created this game in which it was originally a creation, and then through, actually in this case, Ubisoft, because Ubisoft plays a role within this TV show, Ubisoft actually increases or adds the monetization, which is what I experienced in my own games themselves, like playing a game and then you're sold to every which way is Thursday. And yet, that essentially becomes the negative aspect, you can say, the polarity of the world that something's created into. And so I've truly enjoyed my experience with Pokemon, and I would definitely love to travel the world around and talking and learning and experiencing. And actually, the more and more I think about it, I would love to showcase the places in the world that believe are, not that I believe they're real, but others believe they would perhaps be mythological. And so different places such as secret bases and foreign lands and really frigid borders and such, I would love to have the opportunity to essentially showcase these amazing locations that we thought were unavailable to us. And perhaps many of these places that we didn't even know they existed. Some of the disclosure that's come through in the Global Intelligence Agency reports is continents that we weren't even aware of, and places like the time of no time and different areas on the planet that hold miraculous, you can't really say that they're discoveries because they're already discovered, but yet perhaps massive secrets. And I would love to share those with everyone as I discover them. And that's perhaps one of the other ideas of where I want to take New Earth Creations when I get back on the road. And back on the road again, seeing things I might never see again. I love that song. Actually, if you want to take a quick pause right now, I'm probably at some point in the future going to tag or add that video up, but that's Willie Nelson's On the Road Again. And that's a song that came from a TV series when I was a kid about this dog who would consistently just get on the road and keep traveling, and he wanted to see things he'd never see again. Just that idea. And I put that song towards a video that I experienced. And I say experienced because I sat like 2 meters away from these two geese as they were comfortable enough to sit there and bathe in front of me while I did a podcast for Candid Talks a long time ago. And yeah, it was an extraordinary experience to be there, sitting there. And I spoke to them a couple times, I recall, well, if I recall correctly. Actually, I've spoken to so many animals. I believe animals are just as conscious as we are, and they're just as filled with love and perhaps even at sometimes fear. Fear, like one time, for example, when I was in the city of Nara, which is in Japan, it's the ancient capital of Japan, or one of them anyways. And when I was there, they at that time had the deer. And if you're from Nara, I would love to see updated pictures of my deer over there, although it's been quite a while since I've been there. Yet, and of course, if this still happens, but when I was in Nara, the deer, which were a symbol of that area, they were permitted to essentially walk in herds around city. And this isn't a city like my city or even Vancouver City. This is a giant metropolitan style city, very classically decorated, of course, with architecture and such, but yet it was an immense city, busy city. And these deer, they walked around in the parks, across the streets, cars would stop for them, even though it was a supremely busy place, at least as I remember it. And I loved, or felt love, so much for them that I was trying to like get pictures and trying to hold the camera, get myself near to their heads and such. And at one point in time, I even decided to hug the deer, and that was not recommended because that thing bucked and hit me pretty hard in the the rib cage and the pelvis. So learning that you don't go trying to hug a strange deer on the street, regardless of what country you're in. But yet, then I'm trying to hug elephants, so whatever. So yeah, lots and lots of things to say. I really didn't know what I was gonna say when I came on here, and yet there's always something to say because in a sense, the world is always shifting. And quite honestly, in the situation that I'm in, there's not as much interesting conversations. It's more me listening to videos of things that are happening. I listen to reports from several different places, several different resources, I guess. And it's absorbing all of that information. See, in a time right now, there is definitely so many different sources of information, and they're all vying for our attention. And I say vying because it's essentially a somewhat of a battle for what we believe in as Homo sapiens, for what we believe in as citizens of each of our individual countries. As the world moves forward, I do definitely believe that we'll perhaps one day soon, sooner than later, I trust, moving into more of a borderless world, because I think that there's a lot of deception or illusions that have been casted, and I actually use that word from like a Harry Potter aspect, as if magic was casted. See, I've spoken before that our words, the words that come out of our mouth, even the words that we think, they hold power. They hold power to create, the power to destroy, visual representations of just like someone cursing or someone saying bad something to someone and bringing them down, and then that person, spiraling down. Like, that's an example. But yet there's also just simply gossiping about people. being angry and hateful towards them, that's essentially also casting spells. Where, at least I would say, grew up thinking that magic was magic and that was reminiscent or connected to only fairy tales and, wizards and such. And yet, unknowingly to me, we lived in a world where magic was casted daily, and daily, I mean like thousands of times, and even to the degree that the normal person who was just sitting in the coffee shop complaining about a politician, they themselves were essentially casting a spell. And that there are people in our world that were fully aware of this to the point that they hired all these different workers to help protect them, perhaps, or redirect any incoming energy that they didn't want, which was obviously all of it. Because, when you play the antagonist in any movie, you generally will get the audience, for example, staring and disliking that antagonist, except for in the recent movies where they really have done an amazing job of origin stories when it comes to the origin of the villain, getting us to relate to why the villain became the villain, as if, seeing Joker, for example, learning and relating to Joker becoming Joker somehow therefore gives Joker the right to do what Joker did in all Batman movies. Predictive programming, one perhaps would say. There it goes again, cars driving by and revving their engines when they don't really need to rev them by me, but perhaps there's a need that's unseen to me. Oh, it's such a lovely evening. Let me see what we are looking at right now. Oh, some people did say some things, so I'm going to break my concentration. Discern for yourself. It's so hard to actually see. Do not be deceived, and all of the other sources. Interesting, it is not. Magic is casted to you daily at all times. Origin is Homo sapiens, making sense. Okay. Well, I kind of understand a few of what was there. I only see the last little bit, but, I totally agree. Everyone should discern for themselves. And yet creating conversations where news comes in and turning that into discussion, that definitely has the ability to help everyone ripple that information even in further. See, when we simply, at least in my opinion, take information and then that becomes reality, or that just becomes what we think because we heard it from somewhere else, versus what I love doing is actually taking information that I've heard, whether it's from the GIA report or directly from Kim or at a seminar with Greg Braden or wherever it is that I received that information, even my own activities with the UNN and with their field messengers, and taking that information and sharing it and discerning it. But more importantly, as I'd mentioned, taking that information a little bit further. See, one of the things that I learned when I was essentially in the last couple of years going through all of this is that because someone essentially resonates with me means that I'm able to hear them, like what they're saying at that point in time connects with me. Sometimes that's because that person connects with me, but yet that person may not connect with another person. For example, I gave videos from Carrie Kay when I was first really discovering her work and her information, and I shared them with people, and there was different reasons why it didn't connect, from her accent being South African to that she was a woman, and or to like these are people's reasonings, or to that she was just this or that, or like whatever it was. It's essentially people resonate with people differently. So even when sometimes we will receive information such as that from the Global Intelligence Agent report or from someone's blog or however it comes through to me, that discussing it or talking about it and sharing it therefore would allow different people to hear different renditions or versions of it. It's not that I'm essentially relaying or exposing information, because I always encourage people to go to the sources. Actually, when I first started doing these videos, I would even link the different videos that I was referring to when I was talking about them. And yet I've definitely found that there is an awful lot of work when it comes to helping YouTube find my video, all the metadata and titles and thumbnails and all that stuff. So there's definitely a lot, chapter titles and everything. And so that's one of the things I stopped worrying about, is citing the information, because Sean's thoughts is simply a opportunity to hear things perhaps that you may not hear, or discuss things that you have been hearing and perhaps thinking about. And through resonant frequencies that we come together, and we're able to have these different thoughts and talks and discussions and conversations. And I understand it's not always a conversation, considering the fact that I don't necessarily stare down and look at the feed or the chat while it's there. But yet when I do, I definitely appreciate all of the energy, however it is, because I recognize that, you know, life is but a stage, and we're all playing our parts, as Shakespeare once said. And so with that being said, I'm going to leave it there and thank everyone for sharing your attention with me, and congratulate myself on the launch of my podcast yesterday. What did I call it again? It was Changing the Stations with Shone. And I definitely encourage you to spend some time going through the different variations of tracks that I've put on there. It's definitely a musical experience, and emotional too, because each of the songs were selected at specific times where different emotions were essentially captured by the words of the song, the placement within the song, and then therefore the way that that song is therefore laid on the video that I created. So definitely encourage you to share your attention with that. And thank you again to the person in the chat who had made those comments, because discussion or commenting in any way, any time, when we have love within our hearts, can only make everyone stronger. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful night and enjoy the rest of the weekend.